Good morning. Today I'm going to speak about the United Nations 75th anniversary's official theme, Shaping Our Future Together. In this speech, I'm going to summarize the United Nations goals and achievements so far and look towards its future opportunities for encouraging the Earth's people and countries to live democratically, to cooperate peacefully, to respect each other, and to care for the environment. In 1945, World War II ended and the United Nations was established by 51 countries or governments. In 2020, the United Nations has 193 member states. The United Nations goals are to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among the nations, and to promote social progress, better living standards, and human rights. It was very understandable for these goals to be written in the United Nations Charter because between 60 and 85 million people had died in World War II. Fortunately, the United States immediately joined the United Nations, contrary to its predecessor, the League of Nations. As the world's strongest economy and the democracy's official leader, the United States was and is certainly needed as an active member of the United Nations. To resolve the world's armed conflicts peacefully, the United Nations Security Council was established. It has 5 permanent members, each of which has the power to veto or block the Security Council's relations. These countries are the United States, Russia, France, Britain, and China. The United Nations General Assembly elects 10 non-permanent members to the Security Council for a 2-year term. The United Nations' other main organs are the Secretariat, the United Nations Economic and Social Council, or UNESCO, the International Court of Justice, and the Trusteeship Council. During the term of the United Nations First Secretary General, Mr. Trygve Lie of Norway, the United Nations was involved in Europe's, Asia's, and Africa's post-World War II relief efforts, Asia's decolonization, and the Korean War. While Mr. Dag Hammarskjöld of Sweden was the United Nations Secretary General, the US-Soviet relations improved temporarily, decolonization proceeded in Asia and Africa, and the United Nations humanitarian, diplomatic, and peacekeeping efforts gradually became known and appreciated in different parts of the world. Decolonization spread to the Caribbean and Oceania and mostly ended in Asia and Africa during Mr. U Thant's 10-year term as the United Nations Secretary General. He was from Burma, which is currently called Myanmar. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 ended peacefully partly because of General Secretary U Thant's endeavors. The United Nations also started at this time to gradually focus on promoting the environment's protection. While Austria's Kurt Waldheim was the United Nations Secretary General, the United Nations increased its peacekeeping missions. Meanwhile, the African and Asian countries became more influential in the United Nations. Near the end of Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar's term, the Cold War finally ended. He was from Peru. One of the United Nations' major achievements at this time was Namibia's peaceful transition from its occupation by South Africa to full independence. More summits and conferences were held on the sustainable development, democratization, globalization, development aid, and gender equality, starting in the Secretary General Boutros Ghali's term. He was from Egypt. While Ghana's Kofi Annan was the United Nations Secretary General, the United Nations members established 2 intergovernmental bodies, the Peace Building Commission and the Human Rights Council. During the 10-year term of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon from South Korea, the Millennium Development Goals generated 60 billion US dollars in pledges. Another United Nations organ was established, UN Women. The United Nations current Secretary General Antonio Guterres from Portugal has focused on defending the human rights, peace efforts, bridge building, reform, and innovation. Thousands of United Nations volunteers continue to serve around the world to promote democracy, girls' and women's educational and occupational equality with boys and men, healthcare, environmentalism, poverty reduction, and employment programs. Especially in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, there have been major advances in the above fields in the recent decades. Millions of people around the world have also benefited from the United Nations infrastructure programs. The United Nations educational curriculums focus on encouraging the students to become ethnically, racially, linguistically, culturally, and religiously tolerant. This has indirectly led to the international schools spread worldwide. In addition, many people now recycle, eat more vegetables, practice organic farming, reduce the use of motor vehicles, buy ecological products, and engage in ecological tourism. In conclusion, the United Nations has gradually achieved many valuable goals. We can expect this organization to keep fighting for its noble values and to keep encouraging more people to participate in its activities. Happy 75th anniversary to you, the United Nations, and all our best wishes for your future.